we are now going to introduce Eric and Sarah, who are going to, if we're going back to our four legs of the stool, we just got to talk a little bit about some infrastructure. Now we're going to go back to employee resources. And I told you a little bit ago, I was trying to recruit somebody from the Metro, and I've heard enough about what these guys say that I know we have to recruit different than we did in the past. And so this person, I was trying to encourage them to apply for a job. And in addition to just sending them the link, I had somebody text or call them every day for several days in a row. They'd call, and so finally this person texted me, she's like, all right, stop having people call me. She's like, I get it. You want me to apply for this job. So, but I think the point that we're gonna get to here is our approach to recruitment is gonna look and should look a little different if we're gonna be effective. All right, I'll turn it over to these guys.
All right, there's our first slide. Ready? Am I starting? Okay, my name is Eric Osberg, and I am the Rural Rebound Initiative Coordinator for Ottertail County. You heard it mentioned earlier, I believe, by Nicole, and I started in January of 2017.
My name is Sarah Shaky. I probably didn't introduce myself earlier, but I am a project manager with Community and Economic Development for the county.
So, the reason to pay attention to this presentation, and by the way, it's pretty short. We got a half an hour, and so we'll try to keep this moving. And the other good news is we're gonna let you play with your phones. I know some of you are playing with your phones right now, and that's okay, but we're gonna have dedicated phone playing time, and that'll come up at the end. So the reason that we're up here is we're not necessarily hiring experts. I don't work in HR. I'm not so sure that I would call us experts at anything, but what we do day in and day out, 24/7, is we market. We market Ottertail County as a great place to visit, live, and work. And so that's our role here today, is as marketers, not necessarily as HR professionals or hiring professionals. So put on your if you're not in the marketing world, we're gonna dabble in it a little bit. And what I would say about today, right now, is it's a buyer's market, okay? It used to be that the employer, and I don't want to use control or power, but the employer held the cards. You got to pick which employees well, that one, maybe not, this one. The power dynamic has shifted. They are now choosing you. They get to make the choice. You present the opportunity, and the employee, prospective employee, they get to choose. And so what we would ask, and we're going to challenge, if you're in the job hiring business, if it's your job to recruit people, this next half hour might feel a little challenging, and we're just trying to see if there's a better way, okay? So we're going to challenge you a little bit. So the first question I would ask is, does your organization spend the same amount of energy, resources, and talent to woo, and I use the word woo very intentionally, to woo workforce as you do your services or wares? If you're in the business of selling knickknacks, you have people that their job is to sell knickknacks, right? That's how they get compensated. They might even be commissioned knickknack salespeople, right? Does the same amount of energy and effort go into recruiting workforce as it does into selling that product or promoting that product? So that's the mindset that we're gonna try to create today.
Yep, and I would echo too, we're going to use some marketing terms, because like Eric said, we're both in the marketing realm. We're not HR people, so if we say something that's not allowed to, that's just give us a pass on that one. But one thing that I would add to the title of this presentation is Job Seekers as a New Customer. And the reason for that is, like Eric said, we're in a buyer's market. We're shifting from treating our job seekers like a regular old job seeker to now they're the buyer of our stuff, our culture, our employment, our jobs. They're the buyers for that. So thinking about it as a buyer journey, and this is a marketing thing that if you have a background in marketing, you learn this. But there's 3 phases to a buyer's journey. The first one being awareness. So that is, a job seeker deciding to look for a new position, right? They're either burnt out or they want to go somewhere new. And it may not just be for the purpose of a job, it may be a lifestyle change too. So we know that 40% of workers globally, so not just in Ottertail County, say that they could potentially leave their jobs in the next 3 to 6 months. And that's a whole lot of people, right? Like if maybe they're in the thinking stage, but they're considering it, they're in that awareness stage. The next stage that they would get to is consideration, so that they would see something from your employer that piques their interest. They're now looking at your employer as a potential place to go. And what can you be doing in that phase to continue to keep them reading, keep them, hearing your story. And eventually they would get into that decision phase. So they would get to the point where they're deciding that they're gonna apply for a job with your company and they're gonna enter your hiring process. And that hiring process is also another thing we're gonna talk about here.
So I have kids, and one of the things I try to teach my kids is control the controllables. My daughter comes home from whatever, and she's worried about this or that or the other thing, and I tell her, can you control that? And she says, no. I say, well, then don't worry about it. Control the controllables. What I'm gonna introduce to you today is dominate the controllables. If we're in a super hyper competitive market, which I think we are, controlling the controllables isn't enough. Dominating the controllables is what, again, our mindset should be. And I'm gonna tell a real quick story. And if we go over, it's my fault. I used to be a door-to-door salesperson. I lived in the Twin Cities through college. I would knock on my first door at 5 p.m. and then I would knock on my last door at 9 p.m. And eventually, and I did this for like 4 or 5 years. And eventually I got to be a manager, which meant I drove the van and they all piled in the van and we went to our turf and we went door to door and we would sell things. And at halftime, I would drive around. So we started at 5 and we're close to 7 o'clock, I would drive around and I'd check on my team, right? It didn't take long before a new team member, I'd pull up at 7 and I'd say, how's it going? And they'd say, well, nobody's home. Because it was 5 o'clock, right? We started at 5, they weren't home yet. And I don't know if anybody's heard the phrase, nobody wants to work anymore. But I'm gonna put that phrase, nobody's home, right next to nobody wants to work anymore. So my solution to them, the way I dominated that controllable was I would say, are you running from door to door? Or are you walking down their driveway, walking along the street, and then walking up the next driveway? If nobody's home, you got to get to the next door faster. You got to eliminate that variable faster. You can control that. And guess what? When you run from door to door, you get a little bit of energy, you get a little amped up, and when you're standing on somebody's doorstep and you look energized, that whole dynamic of that conversation, as soon as they see you, it changes. So what I'm asking is, decide what you can control and then dominate that. Don't let somebody else's perception of the current situation be in charge of the outcome. So dominate the controllables.
Yeah, and to go with that, dominating also means that you're setting yourself apart from other people, right? So like I said before, if everyone is hiring, what's different about you? What are you doing to sell? I'm going to use another marketing term, your value proposition, which means how are you delivering value to the person that's going to apply for your job? And if you're dominating that controllable, you're picking a point that rings true to them. And that is what gets them to the next phase of that buyer journey. And also thinking about, we've heard about culture and we've heard about some of those different personas, the traditionalists versus non-traditionalists. Those value propositions look different for different people, right? So as an example, and that's what I put up here, a 24-year-old, someone who's my age, who is fresh out of a CNA program, who's looking for a job in healthcare. Their selling points, their value proposition looks very different than a 40-year-old registered nurse with 2 kids, right? Someone who's my age is thinking about, how can I advance in this career? I got my CNA, but my next stage may be an LPN, maybe an RN. What opportunities do you present me as an employer to grow within that career? It also might be tuition reimbursement. Like, we got some bills to pay, right? So it may be an attractive option for your employer to be offering that to them. And then also a flexible schedule. We heard a lot about that, and that's kind of across across all personas as well. But on the other side of that, a 40-year-old registered nurse with 2 kids, she may be saying, I want on-site childcare. We just heard about that. The selling points of that would be, I have a safe space for my kids to go to. I don't have to worry about that during the day. And that's different from the other healthcare provider that's offering me a job where I have to find my own childcare, and potentially that means I have to wait 4 months because the slot isn't open. Another piece of it may be health insurance. And what are your health insurance benefits? Someone who's my age or is 24 and not quite 26 and isn't off their parents' health insurance, that may not be as much of a selling point. Just for the record, I am off of my parents' health insurance. But it may be different for someone who needs health insurance and has 2 kids that they have to take care of. So are you telling that story differently to those 2 people? And then how are you incorporating that into all of those touch points with your buyer? Are you telling those messages on your social media? Are you sharing that in your job descriptions? Are you talking about that in your interviews? That's a great opportunity because, again, they're interviewing you as an employer just as much as you're interviewing them as an employee. So if you're not selling to them, they're probably not going to buy what you're selling. So talking about interviews, what are you looking for? And, oh, by the way, we offer that. Did you know that? We can talk about that and really target those conversations.
This is me?
Yep.
This is me. So don't assume, and so part of the dominating the controllables message is don't assume anything. My job is to promote Ottertail County, Minnesota as a place to live and work and play. And I add the word Minnesota at the end all the time. I don't assume that people know Ottertail County is in Minnesota because my message might be reaching somebody in Indiana. I don't know. So I add the word Minnesota at the end. So don't assume, back to that analogy, don't assume that a 24, 25, 26-year-old knows what a 401k is, right? It's 4 letters. It's an IRS tax code that talks about the treatment tax-wise of these dollars. But saying we have a 401k doesn't necessarily have the same tone as we will help you quit your job someday, right? When do we start working on that? But anyways, don't assume as lovely as, and I got to pick on somebody as lovely as Perham or Ottertail or Fergus Falls is. Don't assume that your prospective employee knows anything about Perham, right? Assume they know nothing. Assume they're from Bismarck, North Dakota, or from Tacoma, Washington. You know what I'm saying? So don't make any assumptions when you go into these marketing efforts or these recruitment efforts when you're trying to gather these other places. So don't assume that they know what the job is. Don't assume they know what they'll be doing, right? I can't think of one off the top of my head, but just don't make any assumptions at all about your prospective employee. Just tell them the whole story because it's a good story. That's the other good news is all of us have really cool stories to tell. So just tell them your story. So one real quick question. How many people here work at a place that has a website? Show me your hands if you have a website. Okay, all right, so we're gonna practice. Am I leading the practice or are you leading the practice?
No, I'll lead it.
Okay.
So take out your phones. This is an opportunity time that you don't often get during presentations, but take out your phones. We're gonna practice. We're gonna put ourselves in a job seeker's shoes, and we're not gonna assume anything, okay? And I also wanted to point out too, the reason that we just asked you to take out your phone and not told you to bring a computer along is because this is what your prospective job seeker is doing. 60% of job seekers are using their mobile phone. So, and Eric and I said while we were preparing for this, we're just as guilty as this is everyone else. We spend our, 8:30 to 4:30 every day on a desktop computer. We are used to looking at the county's website. We are used to looking at Ottertail Lakes Country's website on a desktop computer. When was the last time you looked at your company's website on a mobile phone? Because that is what your prospective job seeker is doing, is looking at it on their phone. So the first thing that you're gonna do is search for your company. Don't put jobs in front of it. Don't put the community in front of it. Just put in the name of your organization.
And hopefully we have enough internet to handle that.
Yeah, hopefully.
What was the Wi-Fi password? Was Hotel 123? Hotel 123? Okay, if you need to get Wi-Fi.
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have assumed that you knew that.
Well, that's okay.
So the first question is, once you've done that search, is your company website or the page that you want your job seeker to come across one of the top 3 results? Raise your hand if it is. Okay.
There you go.
Good, pretty good. All right. If it's not, put that in your back pocket, save that for later, okay? The next step, click on your link, go to your company website. Once you're there, what is the first thing you see, right? Eric talked about, are you putting as much effort and time and energy into recruiting as you are into selling? If your main barrier right now to future growth at your company is workforce, that should probably be another marketing term, above the fold, right? It should probably be one of the first things that someone coming to your website can see.
Can I add?
Yep,
And I would even, and if you want to modernize the term above the fold,
Yeah.
above the fold is a newspaper term, right? Like it's a headline on your doorstep above the fold. I would call it before the scroll, okay? So if you are on your company website right now and your company is really, really, really worried about workforce, and if you don't see in big blinking letters, find your career before if I have to scroll all the way to the bottom, if there's a menu up in the upper right-hand corner that is hidden and I don't know that it's there, again, you can't assume that I know how your website works. If there's 3 little dots in the upper right, yes, I might eventually intuitively, because I'm a quasi-internet person, right? I might push those buttons. But really, if hiring is your number 1 barrier, as Sarah mentioned, when I land on your website on my cell phone, there should be alarms going off. I should have no question about how if I want to work there, this is the button I push. That's dominating the controllables. I would hope that everybody in this room, whether you control that or not, somebody in your organization does. That's dominating the controllables. Sarah?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a few minutes to look at these other 3 questions and some other ones also to keep in mind. But the other 3 questions on here, can you get to a job application in 3 clicks or less? If you're losing people because they have to click, wait for the page to load, click on something else, wait for the next page to load, click on something else, wait for the next page to load, and then finally get to your job application, you probably lost them on the first click, or maybe the 3rd click. So can you get to a job application on your website in those first 3 clicks? Second question, can you complete an application where you're at right now in 10 minutes, right? If you're thinking about your potential job seeker who's maybe in their prime working years and has, 2.3 kids?
Sure, 1.3 now, but that's
kids.
why we're here today.
They might have 1.3 kids running around at dinner time, about to spill whatever slime they're playing with, right? Like if you can't get to the point in 10 minutes or less, they may close their phone and not come back to it because they forgot about it. So I'm gonna give you a few minutes to see what you can do in 10 minutes. Additionally, is there a submit button? Can you do it right now? Or do you have to print something off? Do you have to put a signature on something? Do you have to hand deliver it to your office? Is there some way that you can get to the point right now? Additional things to consider, which I'm not going to ask you to do today, but is your website ADA compliant, right? If someone has vision impairments and they can't see your website, can they hear is your website reading to them? Are things set up? And that's a whole different conversation, which is why I'm not asking you to get to it today. Or is your website translatable, if that's a word, right? If we have a non-native English speaker who is looking at your company website and they can't read anything, you've already lost them. If your website is translatable to Spanish or to Somali or to Chinese or whatever it might be, they might feel even there that's a welcoming point for them. They may be encouraged to keep going through that process if they can read what they're looking at. So those are other considerations as you're doing what you're doing. But I want you to take a few minutes, see what you can get through, and as you're doing this, take some notes. Like Eric said, if it's not you that controls the website, that's fine, but you may have some notes for the person that does, to say, hey, it takes 7 clicks for us to get to a job application, or hey, why do we have to print a job application and sign it and deliver it in person? So just take some notes as you're doing that. We're going to give you time to do that, so we're going to have some awkward silence. But feel free also at your table to have some conversations. If you're finding things on your website, they're like, oh, I wonder if someone else does this, just ask them.
I do want to fill the awkward silence a little bit, and I wanted to re-stress something that Sarah said. When I design stuff to be put on the internet to promote the area, she's right, I do it on a big, huge computer. And make sure, so when our marketing teams, when our HR teams get together and they design this cool stuff to put on our website, a lot of times they're looking at it on a computer. It might say, down, you have this big, beautiful image, and down in the right-hand corner it says, join our, you've got all the elements there, join our awesome team or whatever it is. But once you mobilize it and once you scrunch it, right, like I can't read that. So again, the reason that we're having you do this on your phone is because 60% of your prospective employees are doing it. More than half of the employees are doing it this way. And this isn't a pass or fail grade, okay? If it isn't awesome right now, that's okay. We're just trying to give you another solution to the workforce issue that hopefully you can have some control over. So there, I'll let it go to awkward silence on that.
Okay. We'll give you 5 minutes. Okay.
All right, so again, I want to stress that Sarah and I's intent here today isn't to point out flaws so that you feel bad about your current situation. Because truth be told, if you do this on the county website, it doesn't work as seamlessly as we would like it to either. So Dr. Heal Thyself, like we have work we have to do too. We're kind of all in the same boat, so to speak, right? So, but the good news is, again, when it comes to the workforce shortage issue, you have control over certain elements. And the beautiful, and I tell my kids and other people all the time, the beautiful thing is about once you accept responsibility for your current situation and stop blaming external forces, you have now empowered yourself to solve that problem. And my favorite thing about today is we spent the beginning of the morning was we were kind of talking about the problem and try to get a grasp on the reality of the problem. And the rest of today is all about creative solutions. Like the child care panel, those are solutions, right? Maybe this is a solution. That's what today is all about, and why I'm so excited and thankful that you all are here is because we've come together today to talk about solutions rather than dwell on the problems, and I think that's commendable. So our last, I guess, piece of advice, unsolicited or solicited, would be whatever observations you made about your website on your phone today, bring that to the people who can help with that. I don't know if there's marketing people in the room or if it's all HR people, but does your marketing team and your HR team meet on a quarterly basis to say, okay, what's working? We're selling the snot out of these widgets and gadgets, right? What's working on our marketing side so well that we could implement on our recruitment side? And that's bad news is it's going to change. You could 12-month plans are great, but plans change, right? So is there an ongoing conversation between your marketing department and your HR department to leverage the skills that your marketing sales force has and follow the legality that is required in the HR world? So.
And I wanted to add too, because we know we have some smaller employers here. Some of you don't have a marketing department and a HR department. If you're it, right? If you're a one-man show, one-woman show, just maybe ask someone else to go through this practice, right? What are things that you see that you can reveal to me? And most likely you probably have a website provider, a website developer who can help you make some of those changes. But just ask someone who is not familiar with the ins and outs of your business to provide that third-party feedback. And the interesting conversations that come out of that will probably help you out even a little bit if you're not an HR professional or not a marketing professional. So.
And so my last challenge for you is So I told the story about when at halftime I would drive around and I would pick somebody up and for the first week or two they would say there was nobody home. And I would say, well, did you run between the doors? Eventually they got to understand, don't come to my van and tell me there's nobody home if you didn't run in between doors. So the next time someone in the organization throws up their hands and just says, nobody wants to work anymore, I would challenge you, are you running in between doors? So.
That's the one-liner to end it. Do we have? Yeah.
They're already behind, but the risk of getting further behind, is there any questions for these two?
We'll be around too if you want to have a one-on-one conversation.
Okay. All right, thanks you guys. I'm just trying to get the visual of Eric and a van full of salespeople out of my head. I'm gonna have nightmares about that.